What's up? Welcome to the Existential Stoic Podcast. I don't know about you guys, but if you're like Randy and I play video games my whole life. I love video games. I think they're like the bee's knees. What is it? The cat's pajamas, all those things. Yeah. But there's also a lot of lessons we can learn from video games. Like, I don't know if you've ever thought about playing video games and realized, oh my God, this like actually applies to life. This could actually help me. So today, this week, we're going to talk about lessons learned from video games. I'm Danny from my buddy Randy. What's up, Randy?
Yo, Danny, I'm actually quite excited about this one. There's a lot of things I've been thinking about lessons learned from video games. And like you said in the beginning, we've both been gamers for life. Like I still remember the day I got my original Nintendo Entertainment System, NES. I still
Oh,
remember that
nice.
day. Like,
Dude, you know
mm,
what? You know what I was thinking about? Actually, it's funny because we mentioned this. I was thinking about like what old because like we had the NES, we had the Atari. Because I had a lot of older brothers, we had a lot of systems. But like I remember my favorite one when I was younger was the Sega Master System, and it had like the regular cartridge, but it also had those weird like credit card size cartridges. Do you remember that thing?
I
Did you ever
don't
have one? They were like
know.
little. They were like a size of a credit card, and they were like these really like they were like mini games, almost like a phone game compared to like a console game. It was really weird. It was strange, but it had like this really cool ninja game. Anyway, yeah, besides the point. But yeah,
Ah.
so many systems, so much fun. I mean, yeah, and like
Yeah,
there's so
so
many. Oh, go ahead.
so today we're just going to talk about the lessons that
Yeah,
we've learned from being lifelong gamers.
yeah. And I think too the lessons. The other thing I was thinking too, I've noticed that there's been a lot of like use of games and video gaming to actually do things practically in the world now, like to try and cure certain diseases or to help people overcome things. So like people are starting to realize too that there's a lot we can use these for besides just entertainment, and they are super fun, obviously. With it, you know,
Well, like a good
yeah,
game is going to be mildly addictive and kind of self-reinforcing. So
yeah,
we just keep on playing. And you can totally feel that with like the games where you start playing and all of a sudden you're like
yeah.
you're done. And then like other games where you try and play and you just keep trying and playing, you're like beating your head against the wall and you just can't get into it. And you can kind of see the successes from the failures in that way.
Oh, my favorite
But
is always like when you start playing, next thing you know, it's like 4 hours later, and you're like, "What
I know,
happened?"
right? I know. Yeah. So the idea for this episode came from I've recently been playing uh Zelda Breath of the Wild on the
You
Switch.
don't say.
I do say, yeah. And this is actually I beat the game already, but this is my second time through. I'm enjoying it so much more the second time. But it was interesting because when I first started playing it, this was this was actually my I think my third time trying to play it before I actually got anywhere with it. Like in the beginning, I
Oh,
was
okay.
beating my head against the wall because I got the Switch initially when they came out 4 years ago, and Zelda was like the only game for it, and I was trying to play it, and it just got too hard, and I got lost in the game, and I lost all interest in playing the game. And then I got it again, and same exact thing happened. I got to a place where I just kept dying, and it was too hard, and I couldn't get anywhere. And then eventually, I just started looking up on YouTube how to beat the game, and it all of a sudden got fun.
Yeah. Yeah. You know what's funny though? That's like actually one of the things. First thing that I wanted to mention was I think one of the interesting things when you think about it, you start to see from video games, which is like they're very good. Most games, if they're good games, they're very good at making like the difficulty level just enough to be hard and like challenging, but not so difficult that you give up. Because there's that critical point where if it's like way too hard, only certain people are going to really, that are good enough, skilled enough, are going to push through, and it's not going to have wide appeal. That's why they even have difficulty settings. But it's actually a really good lesson too in life. Because like just like you said, right? Like you tried that multiple times, and you ended up loving the game. I know you love it. I mean, playing through it a
Hmm.
second time, after you beat it too. Because I mean, I think speaks to that. It's a lot of time investing, right? But like
Yeah.
you kept going back to it. And I think that's a really good lesson, which is like, so one of the crucial ones I think we see from video games, which is it forces us to keep going back to a problem that we can't solve until we solve it. And like it's a really good thing to apply in life, I think, and to learn in life, and also recognize that there's ways to sort of make a hard problem less challenging or more within our area, like by watching YouTube videos or by seeking out help. I think that's a really good tool.
Yeah. Well, it's like that. It's like that saying, like never give up. And even it, no matter how what terrible stuff you've done in life or how bad your life has turned out or whatever, as long as you just pick it up again, like as long as you're breathing, you still have a chance. And like that's kind of like me with Zelda because it took multiple times. Like I quit, I completely like rage quit two
Yeah.
times.
Yeah.
I was like, forget it. This game is terrible. This system is worthless. Like all this stuff. And then eventually on the third time, I was just like, you know what? I don't care. I'm just going to 15 minutes a day. I'm just going to get through this game. And it was at that point where I like made it a no matter what scenario that all of
Yeah,
a sudden it became really, really enjoyable.
that's cool. Yeah, and it does. It becomes awesome once you get to that point where you can actually start playing it. Basically, right? You start enjoying the game. You know, it's something
Yeah.
I realized too. This was a. I was thinking back to like, especially like this was when I was like in high school and college. Like I always loved video games. When I got to college, I remember I stopped playing quite as much at first because like I was focused on things, and I realized that like it was then that I realized like they were a really important means for my own mental health and like not like playing all the time, like setting aside time to just do something fun. And I really like video games, so I would started setting aside time like so I wouldn't let myself not play for like months. Instead, I'd set aside time like every week to actually play, and my attitude got a lot better because like I realized like it was a way for me to really just spend time enjoying myself, doing something I like, and not letting the rest of like my stresses bother me. You know what I mean?
Yeah. It's really interesting because at least growing up for me, like I always enjoyed playing video games. That was that was my go-to. It was like eating junk food and playing video games. Like that was my pleasure. But my parents would always be like, don't eat junk food and stop playing video games. And so it was like then I got to this point where I'm trying to live according to how society thinks I'm supposed to live, get a job, get married, do all this BS. And so I cut out playing video games, kind of the same thing you experienced. And I realized that it was like very, very stressful because you
Yeah,
didn't have those. I mean, you could call them addictions or you could call them pleasures that you have that are just like not that bad. It's just playing some video games. Because I will say there was a year that I lost playing World of Warcraft, and that was just like you have to chalk that one up to experience. If you lose an
yeah.
entire year playing an MMORPG, you got to chalk that up to experience. But
Well, no, I think that's also something that's a good lesson from video games, which is like, knowing your limits and your tendencies, right? Because some things like some games are addicting. Dude, there's been games where I've like totally like just ignored things I was supposed to do for days or weeks and just played this game, and I think like that's a good thing to learn, especially early on, that okay, I have to with this type of game, I have to manage myself very carefully. Because I think most games, like I don't have a problem. I can play here and there. I'm fine. It's not a big deal. Or I set time aside, so I know that it's like it's scheduled and it's safe. It's whatever. But especially when I was younger, there were times where I would just like binge play, and I think that's like, yeah, it can be a problem. So I think that's something also effective to learn, which is if you do this too much, it's going to affect your life.
hmm yeah, all right. So lessons learned from video games. I would say my most recent lesson is that what I've gotten from playing Breath of the Wild the second time through. It is so much more fun the second time through because I kind of like I understand the game. I'm not scared anymore. Like I'm able to explore a lot more and because I already know like where it's going to go and I kind of relate this to life. Like so many times when I'm starting out
Yeah.
something new, I'm always hesitant cuz like what happens if it goes really badly? What if I fail? Like all these terrible things. But then I look at it like, well, what if I wasn't a noob at this? Like, how would I approach it if this was my second time through or 10th time through or 100th time through? And it gives you like a lot more freedom and mobility to actually enjoy what you're doing.
I like that. It's kind of like doing that visualization exercise from the Stoics almost, but actually doing it, with a game, which is kind of awesome. But the other thing you remind me of too is like, that's kind of the experience I've had with also just growing up, like with age. It was like I used to always feel that way, like that. New things would be kind of scary, like terrifying. That fear of failure, that fear of like, messing up would be like overwhelmingly like so much pressure. And as I've gotten older, it's like maybe it is just from repetition, but like I realized like that it's almost like playing a game through the second time. Like because you do all these things, you realize that a lot of things we do are just these things we have done before, and they're just not as scary. Like when we started like learning coding, like I approached it, it's just fun because I've already been to school so many times. I don't really, it's not, that's not going to be something that stresses me out that much anymore. It just isn't like, and I think your attitude is way healthier when, almost like on a second playthrough, if you think of it that way. It's kind of funny, but yeah, I like that one. It's more
Mm-hmm.
knowledge about what's going to happen.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. What lessons have you gotten
I
recently?
think I recently, I think, I noticed this with like, oh my God, when I was playing Metroid Dread recently, it was just like not to give up because like that game, I felt like, I don't know, there wasn't a difficulty settings and like I'm not as like fast on like controllers as I used to be when I was younger. And like that game, I felt like every boss was like just freaking chance that I actually won. Because I either get like
Yeah.
destroyed or I would just somehow manage to make it through. And it was like, and so like I knew every time like I got to a boss, and which is often in that game, it was just like, okay, I just have to basically grind through this and do this God knows how many times until chance is on my side.
Yeah.
Like, sometimes like it's not really skill. It's not really about your abilities. It's not about anything. It's just about throwing things against the wall or banging your head against the wall until it breaks, you know?
Yeah, dude, that's I mean
And
that's
it's,
that's a good thing because sometimes you just need to keep on going until the
yeah,
game gives up, you know?
yeah,
I
yeah,
mean, I remember playing that game because it always sucked because you would finally beat a boss and then you would have like 5 minutes where you could actually go somewhere and then you would get stuck and just die a million more times. And I was like, oh, come
yeah,
on, you can only play like 5 minutes at a time.
yeah,
But
yeah, dude, it was
um,
hard.
actually, one of the lessons I got from that game was with dealing with the bosses. I didn't realize it until later on, but once I learned how to avoid the boss's attacks, that's
Yeah,
all I would
yeah,
focus on for like the first 5 or 10 deaths is just how to avoid their attacks. And then I could just avoid their attacks all the time and hit them back at any time. And I think that's a great lesson because, like, if you can avoid the things that'll take you out in life, like avoid going to jail, avoid terrible addictions, like avoid very bad people in your life. And if you can just figure out how to avoid these things that'll take you down, that'll really impact your life negatively, then you have a very good chance of succeeding.
that is actually a really good point too. And it's funny, I noticed the same thing later on too, like because I would go in and the first times, like the first early bosses, I would go in with that attitude of like offensive, like I need to attack,
Yeah.
which is really the wrong approach in that game. You really need to run away at first and
Hmm.
figure things out. And I think that's the other side of it too, is you need to actually like you need to know the situation you're getting into before you actually act. And I think that's like a great lesson to learn from like you can learn it from any video game really, which is like, most games you have that like tendency to go in like guns blazing and just shoot things up. But there's a lot where like you also actually it's more beneficial to kind of understand the situation, understand the enemy first, and then proceed. And like because you have that knowledge to help you actually get through it. I think that's true of so many things in life too, which is like
Hmm.
if you can figure it out first and get that information, you can do it much better. Like I wish with college, like if I had more information before going to college, right? I mean, there's lots of things in life that I could point back to, like in hindsight, that man, if I thought that through more and took time to actually look at it carefully, look at all the options, I might have done it differently. And I think that's a
Yeah.
hard thing because we feel that we're so pressured to keep moving forward, right? But like, yeah.
That's actually an episode idea that I've had, one that we'll do in the future is if we could live life again, what would we do differently?
Ooh, that's a
Yeah,
good one. I
that would,
like that. Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
that
Oh,
would
we
be a
should do
good
that.
one.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
I definitely wouldn't go to college. Wouldn't waste
No way,
time on
dude.
that one. Yeah.
It's funny too, though,
Um,
but it's like it's funny too because that's the other tough one is like knowing the future too, because like knowing all the things that happen with the economy and everything, it's like now,
yeah.
right? But
Yeah,
whatever.
you
Yeah, we'll
can't
talk about
now.
that then.
Yeah. So another lesson that I got from video games is something that's coming up in other areas of my life now, but it's taken me a long time to realize it. So, like when I was a kid, I remember my friends were like really, really good at video games. Like they beat like Zelda, like the gold cartridge for
Oh
Nintendo.
yeah, yeah, it's a
They
good one. Yeah.
they beat like Jaws. They beat every Contra. They would beat it on like 3 lives. Like all my friends were amazing at video games, and I sucked. and like
Yeah.
and like I beat myself up about it for like most of my life. I don't. I literally didn't actually beat a video game until that game Horizon came out on the PlayStation 4. Like a
Oh,
few, I don't
Zero
know, probably
Dawn. Yeah, yeah, yeah. That was
yeah,
not
like
long
the
ago.
first
Yeah.
one. Yeah. So like that was the first game that I actually legitimately beat the entire game. And I kind of like so the lesson from that is like I suffered a lot when I was younger because there were other people that were better than me. But fast forward to now, I'm still playing video games. I'm still very much enjoying video games. All of my friends who are amazing at video games now, back then, they don't play video games anymore. They're done.
Yeah.
They've like
Yeah.
moved on to other stuff. I mean, I'm sure they're having fun doing whatever they're doing, but like there's so much joy and fun and good stuff in video games that like they're missing out on it right now. And so I kind of see the parallel in my life where like very early on, I didn't know what I wanted to do in my life. It took me a very, very, very long time. And I'm just right now at around 40 years of age, figuring out exactly what I want to do with my life, or at least having a bit more of an idea. And so I suffered a lot because of that when I was earlier, because I saw a lot of other people who were like great artists and they knew that was what they wanted to do with their life, or they were great athletes and that was what they were wanting to do, or they were
Yeah.
brilliant physicists and that's what they wanted to do. And I was so jealous my entire life because all these people had this stuff figured out. But now as I'm getting older and I'm actually seeing stuff that I can do, that I'm good at, that also brings me fulfillment, all of a sudden I realized that like all that suffering was just there to kind of direct me towards this. It didn't matter that it took 40 years because now I'm here.
Yeah, I think that's a good lesson, which it doesn't matter how long it takes as long as you get there. Because then you still reap you still reap the benefits of it. You still enjoy it. And also, I like what you said too, because I think that happens to a lot of people where they give things up, where they get frustrated themselves because they're not like super good at it right away. I mean, we talk about that all the time. Like, that feeling of like, I need to be perfect now, or the best at this now, or a master now. And like, I notice that with games because actually, honestly, I feel like I've gotten worse. And like, not mentally in how I approach them, but like, just like, it just like probably my reaction time slower or something. I don't know. But like, it's funny because I still enjoy them and I still like them. And I just don't care about any of that. Like, I'm not playing against them. It's just for me anyway. And I think that's an important thing to realize, like, that some things in our lives, like, they can just be things that are just fun for us. They don't have to be something you make money on. They don't have to be something that you compete against everybody else on. It could just be done because it's fun. And I think there is so much value in that. And it's something so many people forget, especially in like consumerist cultures like ours, or workaholic cultures like ours, where like, if you're not earning money from it, people view it as a waste of time. And I think that's a very toxic way of thinking. Like, if you want to be happy, you have to do things that you just like.
Yeah, definitely. So what other lessons have you gotten? Any other lessons?
I mean, there's a lot, man. There's been so many games that I just like, I think too, they've actually been a good way. Video games, I know people say this about like was it Minecraft a lot, but like I think all video games are a really good way too to like work on like logical thinking, to work on like your reasoning, and like, because they're puzzles, right? It's like any other puzzle. People talk about all like people always praise like Sudoku or like crossword puzzles as being like building the mind, but they forget that video games are just they're beautiful, they're artistic, they're exciting, but they're also puzzles. And like, I think that we build skills by engaging with them. So I think that they also build some important skills like of how to solve problems, how to like enjoy yourself, all these things, little things that they can do and add up to I think a really beneficial experience.
Yeah, because it's one of those things where like it allows your mind to rest.
Yeah.
You're not like actively trying to figure something out. It almost like opens up your mind for everything else in your life, because all of a sudden all these stresses that you've had in life, all these things you've been trying to work out, when you're just busy doing something else and engaged in it, all of a sudden your mind can figure out those other things.
I think it's one of the most beneficial things for me, I find with them still to this day, which is like my mind races it always has all the time. And like, it's hard. There's few things that I can really engage in that make me forget everything else. And games have always been one of those. So it's like something I'll always do because it's that benefit is so important. You know what I mean? And I think realizing that is helpful.
Yeah. Another thing that I've gotten from gaming is like the camaraderie, the friendships, hanging out with friends. So like, funny story. I remember back when you remember 007 GoldenEye, the first like first person shooter.
Who doesn't?
Okay.
Yeah.
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 So like,
the multiplayer was amazing.
I know that was like the first person shooter multiplayer, and like I played that game so much, like at least
I think everybody
to
did. I don't know.
Everybody did
didn't play that game.
Yeah, and like I thought I was really really good at that game. Fast forward a few years, my brother and his friends were playing Halo or Halo 2, and they were talking about how they were going to like I'd never played the game. They were having like a bunch of people over to play the game, and they're like, "Oh, dude, we're going to destroy you." And I was like, "Not a chance. I'm like an ace at GoldenEye. Like, not a chance."
Yeah.
But meanwhile, GoldenEye was a single joystick. Halo was a dual
Halo's too,
joystick. So I
and
spent the
like way
first
faster.
so I spent like the first 8 hours just staring at the ceiling, going in circles as they kept killing me.
Yeah, dude, it's
Uh,
oh god, that's funny.
but anyway, so what I got from that was like then like I had a new game where like I could play with friends and you didn't actually need to be in the I missed playing in the same room as friends, but this is something where you could play with friends who could be across the country or across the world or different things like that. And like it was being able to connect with friends on a regular basis around something that you enjoyed. So that was another thing that I got from video games was that like it's very important to connect with friends. Like especially nowadays, like you hear all these reports about kids being the most depressed ever and like the least socially integrated and like all this stuff. And it's just like we forget about friends. Like I mean, I'm guilty as can be because before we were doing this every week, like I didn't have
Yeah.
regular friends that I contacted, and I didn't even realize the benefit of it. So it's yeah.
No, that's a good one actually. I used to do that too, and thinking back, like, yeah, because I haven't done that in a long time either until we started doing this. And like prior to that, like it was video games that was my usual weekly connection with friends because I had certain like it was like I think Uncharted, Dead Space, I would play, pretty much every week with somebody online, and that was like the way to connect. And it's super healthy because you forget about the need for that. I think it's so easy to get caught up, especially once you get into that point of like trying to make your way in the world on your own, trying to get a job, trying to get, establish yourself and all. It's so easy to get caught up in the pressure of trying to do that as fast as possible and win rather than like doing it in a way that's healthy and happy and enjoyable.
Well, okay, so this is a really important topic because we're talking about like social connections with friends, and I remember that year that I lost to World of Warcraft. Like I did value the friends that I met on World of Warcraft, and we would do raids together. Like,
Yeah.
Fridays and Saturdays were the best because we would all meet up and we would all go do all this crazy stuff and like have these awesome adventures and win together and die together and like all this stuff. But like I still remember there was like a day where I had figured out World of Warcraft. Like I was very, very good at the game. I had accumulated so much gold, and I was like, but at the same time, I was broke financially in the real world.
Yeah.
and I
Yeah.
was and I was like, why am I wasting my time doing this? Why don't I just actually figure out how to do this in the real world? And
Yeah.
there's definitely a disconnect there somewhere.
There is. But I think, but you also realize that you could do it. You could do it in there. So I mean, there is a positive spin to that, which is like, yes, you might have like it might have been like a year where you were financially broke or whatever and not participating in the real world as much, but it was also made you realize that you could. That there was nothing
Mm-hmm.
there's I mean, and that's the other funny thing, which is like people forget that there's like if you can do it in there, there's no difference really, because they're so I mean, especially nowadays, games are so sophisticated and stuff. And like, if you think of World of Warcraft, what's it take to succeed? You have to meet people, you have to form connections, you have to make decisions, you have to understand like the strategy of it, you have to
You
understand
have to
all the different
grind,
yeah,
do
you
stuff
have
you
to
don't want
grind.
to do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it's literally like there's nothing. I mean, I think that's the funny part. Like people think that it's just a separate thing, but they're really close to life a lot of times. And like we can learn all these important lessons about just like sometimes you just have to keep trying. Sometimes you just have to keep doing it. Sometimes you just have to, unfortunately, you have to level up. You have to spend time learning those skills. I think all that applies to life. And I think it's like it's super important because we get so focused like in life on being like, I gotta be perfect now. And that's like such a bad attitude because it just never will happen. You'll just find yourself so frustrated that you'll constantly give up rather than like, how can I do this? How can I make this work? What do I need to do to get to that point where I'm at that level where I can actually go do it quickly, do it easily, or win?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good one. I would say one of my final lessons that I got was I had this friend who was phenomenal at Miss Pac-Man. Like he could like beat the game flawlessly, no problem. And I was so blown away by it. And he had also done very well financially in the world. But and so like for a while I was jealous. Like a lot of people see Elon Musk and his wealth and they'll be jealous of that. But then I took like more of a holistic look at his life and I saw like how it was just like falling apart all over the place. Like all these areas where like he just didn't have integrity with people. His marriage was falling apart. He was, and it, you know, they were having issues with faithfulness and different stuff like that. And just like literally like every area except for Miss Pac-Man and money, his life was just like falling apart. And yet I was worshiping this guy because he had money and because he could
Yeah.
play Miss Pac-Man really well, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah.
So like it was kind of an eye-opening experience because like, fortunately my brother was like, what do you see in this guy? And I was just like, but he's got money figured out. And he's like, yeah, but look at the rest of his life. Like it's
Yeah,
in
it
shambles.
sucks.
And so like that was a really important eye-opening lesson because like even though somebody may have something with video games or with money or with relationships or with I don't know, they're brilliant or whatever it is, like you have to kind of take a big picture look at it and be like, really, would you want all of that stuff that's going on with them? And
Well,
like
that's the truth,
maybe
right? Yeah. Yeah.
and maybe if they do have it all figured out, then yes, figure out a way to spend more time with them. But if really they're just kind of like one area doing really well and you're worshiping them because of that, maybe you better kind of look around for some other people.
No, I think that's a great lesson. And you can learn that from video games too, which I think is just like, you know, there's a benefit to having broad knowledge and broad ability sets and skill sets in different areas. And not because it's very easy. Anybody can be really great at one thing if they just ignore everything else. Right? If everything it's true, right? We can all hyper focus on one thing and do really well at it. But the fact is, if you want a good life, you need other stuff. You need the rest of your life to be sort of figured out to a certain degree. You need integrity, you need character, you need all these other things. And that takes a long time to develop. It's hard. And all of us approach it from different starting points. So it's like, yeah, I think that's a great lesson, which is, also look at the whole life, and like it's like when people worship these people you know, on games where like, they're kick ass at this game, but it's like you don't see that that's all they do. And that the rest of their life is like in shambles or just a mess.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, do you really want
Mm-hmm.
that? Like, would you want that
I
trade-off?
remember in university, like when I first went there, my first year, I hung out with a bunch of skateboarders, and like some of them were professional skateboarders, and like they were phenomenal, but they didn't even know how to work a microwave. Like
Yeah.
I couldn't believe it. I was like, you've never just pushed a cup power and like a time and then start. Like you've never done that in your life, and it was just like it was mind-boggling because they were phenomenal skateboarders. They were on the cover of Thrasher and different stuff like that, but like
Yeah.
they couldn't do anything else.
Because that's all they did was skateboard
Yeah.
every
Yeah.
day. Yeah, I mean that's just it. Like, right? Like, that's all you spend your time on. You're gonna be great, and that's fine. And that's what it takes. Unfortunately, that's what it takes sometimes. I mean, I think, that's the other lesson to learn too, which is like in certain things, like the Olympic Games, athletes and stuff. A lot of them, like, they are good at one thing. Because to be that level, you have to give up everything else. And
Mm-hmm.
it's, and you have to realize that only certain people are going to be able to do that because there are only certain people are going to have the passion to actually do that. Most
Yeah.
of us, I think, want a more well-rounded life.
Yeah, it's kind of like what are you willing to give up to have that thing that you want? And that's an important question you got to ask yourself.
It is. And I think if you're willing to give it up, great. If you're honestly willing to give it up, that's good because that means something. But like if you're not, then you might want to take the larger look at your life. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Any other lessons you want to add?
No, I think that's it. I think we covered it all.
Well, I think, yeah,
Oh,
just
you
keep
know
going
what?
back and
One
keep trying.
last one.
Yeah.
I've just been playing games that I enjoy over and over again. And I've been doing this a
Cool.
lot in life with like books that I enjoy reading, just reading them over and over again. Because like for a long time, I thought that there was value in like exposure to more stuff. But really, I think it's more going deeper in the stuff that I actually enjoy.
Dude, you know what's funny? I've always read certain books over and over. There's books that I've read 20, 30 times, and I just find something new or more depth or something else in it every time. And it always amazes me that, like, I thought I knew it, and yet I don't know it. You know what I mean? Like, I could
Yeah,
even, like,
isn't it crazy?
yeah, I mean, I could literally just spout off probably pages and pages of the book from memory, like verbatim, and yet I don't. There's still things I don't. It's like amazing, and I think that's true with video games. If you play through and like when you get through the first time, maybe and the second time you start like really world exploring and you see like the full scope of it, the full design. It's really neat. It teaches you how to appreciate things on a different level, I think, and it also teaches you how to like really get deep into something, like actually really understand it, actually really see the full scope of what it can offer, which is a really good one. I like that one.
Mm-hmm.
All
So
right.
that was my last one.
Well, in there. I like that one. It's a good one. All right. That's lessons learned from video games. Thanks for sticking with us. Watch us on YouTube. Listen wherever you get your podcast. We'll be back later this week with another quick fix. Like, subscribe, share. It helps us out a lot. Until then, though, later, Randy.
Later, Danny.